There is a specific moment, one that replays in the minds of people who have been through it when they realize that their kindness was interpreted as weakness. They were kind to someone, genuinely kind, not as a tactic, but as an actual expression of how they saw that person. And instead of that kindness being received as a gift, it was received as an invitation to test them, an invitation to take advantage, an invitation to see exactly how far they could push before the person would finally break or push back. And by that time, significant damage had already been done. The person wonders now what the line is between being a good person and being a person who gets destroyed by people who don't operate under the same constraints. How is it possible that the people who are most ruthless, most willing to hurt others to get what they want, seem to end up more successful, more respected, more protected than the people who spent their lives trying to be kind? And why does the world seem to punish goodness so consistently that you have to wonder if goodness is actually just a strategy for getting stepped on? The answer reveals something about human nature that we spend most of our lives trying to deny, something that challenges every story we've been told about how to live a good life. The world does not reward kindness. The world rewards power. Kindness is only sustainable if you also have power, because power is what stops people from exploiting your kindness. Without power, without the willingness to hurt people if they hurt you, without boundaries so clear and so enforced that people learn not to violate them, kindness becomes a liability. It becomes a sign that you're available for exploitation. It becomes an advertisement that you can be walked over without consequences. And the people who understand this, the people who have learned to be ruthless when necessary, are the ones who actually survive with their core selves intact. The kind people, the people who refuse to be ruthless, often end up broken, bitter, angry about the unfairness of it all, unable to understand why being good wasn't enough. Let's be precise about what ruthlessness actually means, because this is where most people misunderstand. Ruthlessness is not about being cruel. It's not about hurting people for enjoyment or treating people badly as a default. Ruthlessness is about being willing to hurt people if they hurt you and being willing to do it without guilt or hesitation. It's about understanding that some people, some situations, some threats require a response that is not kind and being willing to give that response without agonizing over whether you're being a good person. It's about understanding that your primary responsibility is to your own survival and the survival of those you're responsible for, and that this sometimes means disappointing people, refusing people, hurting people, because their needs are not your responsibility and their disappointment is not your problem. Think about what happens in the mind of a person who encounters someone kind. If that person is also good, they might appreciate the kindness and reciprocate it. But if that person is selfish or damaged or predatory, they think something very different. They think, this person is kind. This means they're unlikely to hurt me. This means I can probably get what I want from them without serious consequences. Let me test this. They test by asking for something slightly unreasonable and seeing what happens. If the kind person agrees, they now know they can ask for more unreasonable things. If the kind person says no, they look at whether that no came with genuine enforcement or whether it was just words. A person who is genuinely kind but lacks ruthlessness will often say no while still appearing apologetic, still appearing like they care about disappointing the other person. And what the tester learns is that this person's no is not actually no. It's negotiable. It's changeable if the tester applies enough pressure or makes the kind person feel bad enough. So they keep pushing. And the kind person keeps saying no while continuing to seem bothered by disappointing them. And eventually, the kind person either gives in or ends up in constant conflict with people who won't respect their boundaries. A ruthless person, by contrast, says no differently. When they say no, there's something underneath it that communicates. You can push, but if you push hard enough, I will hurt you. This is communicated not necessarily through words, but through a quality of presence, a clarity about the consequences, an unwillingness to apologize for the boundary itself. And what the tester learns is that this person's no is actually no. It's not negotiable. It's not changeable. If you push, you will face consequences. And so the tester, unless they're genuinely willing to accept those consequences, stops testing. They find someone else to exploit. They find someone kinder, someone more willing to bend. The ruthless person has essentially made themselves not worth the trouble, and as a result, people leave them alone in ways they don't leave kind people alone. This is not a small distinction. This is the difference between a person who is constantly dealing with people violating their boundaries and a person who rarely has to deal with that because their boundaries have been established as real. The kind person spends enormous energy managing people's disappointment with their boundaries. The ruthless person spends almost no energy on this because they never made their boundaries subject to negotiation in the first place. They establish them as immovable and then simply enforce them when necessary. From the outside, this might look cruel. From the inside, from the perspective of the ruthless person, it's actually far more peaceful because they're not constantly in conflict with people testing their limits. Let's look at how this actually manifests in specific relationships, because this is where the difference becomes undeniable. A kind parent who wants to be their child's friend, who wants the child to like them, who tries to be gentle and permissive, often ends up with a child who doesn't respect them, who tests boundaries constantly, who takes advantage of the parent's kindness. The child doesn't feel safe because there's no real structure, no clear consequences, no genuine authority. A parent who is willing to be ruthless, who sets clear boundaries and enforces them without apology, even if the child is upset, often ends up with a child who actually respects them and feels safe, precisely because the boundaries are real and reliable. The ruthlessness in this context is not cruelty, it's actually care. It's saying, I care about you enough to not let you do things that are bad for you, and I don't need you to like me for setting those boundaries. Your long-term well-being matters more than your short-term happiness with me. The same pattern shows up in romantic relationships constantly. A person who is kind and accommodating, who constantly tries to meet their partner's needs, who is willing to sacrifice their own boundaries to keep the peace, often ends up with a partner who takes advantage of that willingness. The partner escalates their demands because they've learned that the kind person will bend. They test the relationship by seeing how much they can get away with. And the kind person, continuing to be kind, continues to accommodate, continues to sacrifice until they're so depleted and resentful that the relationship breaks. A partner who is willing to be ruthless, who has clear boundaries and enforces them, who is willing to walk away if those boundaries are violated, paradoxically often ends up with a better relationship because the other person learns that they're not dealing with someone who can be manipulated. They learn that violations have consequences, and as a result, they either shape up or leave, and either way, the ruthless person ends up in a healthier dynamic. This is one of the most counterintuitive realities about human relationships. People actually respect ruthlessness more than they respect kindness, and they're far more likely to treat a ruthless person well than they are to treat a kind person well. This is not because humans are fundamentally evil. It's because ruthlessness signals strength and self-respect, while unchecked kindness can signal weakness and a lack of self-respect. When someone is ruthless, other people understand that violating that person's boundaries will have consequences, and so they're careful. When someone is kind without any ruthlessness underneath it, other people understand that violating that person's boundaries might feel bad for the kind person, but won't actually have real consequences, and so they're less careful. The kind person ends up having to manage far more boundary violations than the ruthless person, which means far more conflict, far more frustration, far more damage. But here's where this gets even darker and where we need to be honest about what the world is actually like. There are people in the world who will hurt you given the opportunity. There are people who have no internal restraint, who will take as much as they can get, who will lie and manipulate and destroy if it benefits them and they think they can get away with it. These people exist. They're not rare. They're embedded in every workplace, every family system, every social group. They're not all obvious. Some of them are very good at seeming kind while actually being ruthless underneath it. But they exist, and a person who is genuinely kind but lacks ruthlessness is essentially defenseless against them. A kind person's kindness will be used as a weapon. A kind person's willingness to see the best in people will be exploited. A kind person's hope that if they just treat people well, people will treat them well in return, will be systematically violated until the kind person is broken. The ruthless person, by contrast, assumes the worst until proven otherwise. They don't trust easily. They don't give people the benefit of the doubt repeatedly. They watch for exploitation and respond to it immediately and severely. This makes the ruthless person hard to exploit because they're actively looking for it, and they've decided in advance that if they find it, they will respond without mercy. The predator looks for easy prey, and a ruthless person doesn't look like easy prey. So the predator moves on to someone kinder, someone more trusting, someone more willing to see the best in them. And the ruthless person survives while the kind person gets destroyed. Now, let's talk about the specific kind of ruthlessness that creates this survival advantage without creating a person who is destructive in other ways. This is critical because ruthlessness, if deployed indiscriminately, makes someone dangerous and often ends in isolation. The kind of ruthlessness that's actually powerful is what you might call selective ruthlessness or principled ruthlessness. It's ruthlessness in defense, not in offense. It's ruthlessness toward people and systems that violate your boundaries, not toward random people who haven't done anything to you. It's ruthlessness as a response to being crossed, not as a default mode. A person with this kind of ruthlessness can be kind to people who don't violate their boundaries and ruthless to people who do. They can be trusting with people who have earned trust and immediately protective of themselves with people who violate that trust. This requires a very specific calibration. You need to be kind enough that people who are good feel welcomed and comfortable around you. You need to be ruthless enough that people who are predatory learn immediately that you're not an easy mark. You need to set boundaries clearly enough that there's no ambiguity about what is and isn't acceptable. And you need to enforce those boundaries consistently enough that people learn that violating them will have real consequences. This combination creates something almost magical, a person who has both genuine friends and complete immunity from exploitation. The people who like them for good reasons. The people who would exploit them quickly learn to leave them alone and find easier prey. Think about the people you know who seem most secure, most free from drama, most capable of actual peace. I would wager that almost all of them have this quality. They're not necessarily aggressive or mean, but there's a clarity to their boundaries and a real willingness to enforce them. There's a quality that communicates, I'm nice, but don't test me. And what this does is it creates a filter. The good people feel like it's safe to be around them because the good people have nothing to fear from boundaries. The predatory people learn quickly that they're not an easy mark and move on. The result is a person surrounded by actually good people and completely protected from predatory people. This is the actual payoff of ruthlessness. Here's something that's worth acknowledging about the cost of kindness without ruthlessness. It doesn't actually help the people you're being kind to. A person who enables someone's bad behavior is not helping them. A person who allows themselves to be exploited is actually training the exploiter that exploitation works. A person who abandons their own boundaries to accommodate someone else is not teaching that person that their needs matter. They're teaching that person that they can get what they want by pushing hard enough. In this sense, ruthlessness can actually be an expression of true care. By refusing to enable someone's bad behavior, by enforcing your boundaries clearly, by not rewarding violation with accommodation, you're actually helping that person learn something they need to learn. You're teaching them that their behavior has consequences. You're giving them information that might actually change them. The person who is endlessly kind without any enforcement is not helping. They're enabling. This also means that the most ruthless, most boundaried people often end up being safer, more trustworthy, more genuinely caring than the people who are kind without limits. A ruthless person who cares about you is infinitely more trustworthy than a kind person who is kind to everyone equally, because the ruthless person has decided that you deserve their ruthlessness in your defense. A ruthless person who says they love you actually means it in a concrete way because they've decided that your well-being is worth fighting for. A kind person who loves everyone equally hasn't really committed to anyone specifically. The ruthless person's love is scarce and therefore valuable. The kind person's love is abundant and therefore somewhat meaningless. Now, there's a particular kind of ruthlessness that's worth distinguishing because it's the kind that actually creates power and respect without creating isolation or justifiable resentment. This is the ruthlessness of not caring what people think of you when they violate your boundaries. A person who is ruthless but still cares deeply what people think of them will constantly be in conflict because they're trying to enforce boundaries while also managing people's image of them. But a person who is ruthless and genuinely doesn't care whether people like them for enforcing their boundaries has achieved something almost supernatural. They've removed themselves from the approval-seeking matrix entirely. They're not trying to be liked, they're not trying to be understood. They're just living according to their values and letting people respond however they respond. And this freedom, this complete unconcern with whether people approve of their boundaries, is what makes the boundaries actually powerful. Because people sense that this person is not going to be moved by disapproval or guilt. The boundaries are real. So here's what becomes possible once you understand this. You can stop being destroyed by a world that doesn't care about your kindness. You can stop giving to people who take without giving back. You can stop accommodating people who violate your boundaries repeatedly. You can stop apologizing for disappointing people who have no right to your accommodation. You can become ruthless in your self-protection, and as a result, you can stop being broken. And paradoxically, this ruthlessness might actually make you a better friend, a better partner, a better person, because you'll only be around people who deserve your kindness. And you'll enforce your boundaries clearly enough that relationships have actual integrity. But here's the question that should follow you, the one that will sit with you the next time someone takes advantage of your kindness, the next time someone violates your boundary and you let them, the next time you apologize for disappointing someone who violated you first. How much of your kindness is actually genuine care? And how much of it is just an inability to be ruthless? And what would your life actually look like if you became willing to hurt people who hurt you, not out of anger, but out of clear-eyed self-protection?